Which of these mid-ranges flies farthest? An overstable one? An understable one? Maybe something in between. Hey everyone, it's Greg from Six Sided Discs. This is Flight Numbers Don't Matter, and we are going to find out which of these 34 mid-ranges can quite literally go the distance. Today's video is sponsored by Ocean Discs. More on them in just a bit. These 34 mid-ranges also represent the most discs we've ever tested in one video. But to be honest, some of them don't realistically have a chance at flying the farthest. At least, we don't think they do. For example, this is the Innova DX Condor, a superclass mid-range weighing in at 200 grams. And I included it because my son just happened to have it in his collection. And there was room for one more mid-range in the bin. Does it really have a chance to compete here? Not at all. Thrown on a slight hyzer, it actually holds that angle, pushing forward and finishing with a respectable 341 feet. But 341 feet is not even close to making the cut, so the DX Condor is out. Team Six Sided Discs' Caleb Thomas is going to be throwing all of these mid-ranges in central Ohio with a very faint tailwind, maybe 5 miles an hour, on a slightly downhill fairway, so keep that in mind for our distances. Oh, and by the way, 6-speed mid-ranges are out. The CAX from Kastaplast or the Stig or the Squall from DGA are a little too much of a driver to fit into our test, so we're going to stick to 4 and 5-speed mid-ranges. While the Innova Condor didn't have the distance to challenge for the win, a disc that has some respectable distance is the Clash Discs Barry. In steady plastic, the Barry's rated at 5.5, -1.1, and it's one of many straight mid-ranges that we're going to be testing today. Hailing from Finland, Clash Discs has some excellent plastic, so let's see if the Barry can set a solid benchmark. From a slight hyzer, the Barry flips up to flat, but only for a split second, before gliding and fading its way to the current distance to beat, 382 feet. But in the world of mid-ranges, is distance everything? Not exactly. To illustrate that for us, we'll need a word from today's sponsor, Ocean Discs. The Ocean Discs Sea Turtle released just last week, and it's the first ever disc golf disc made using 60% recycled ocean waste plastic. Available in 3 different plastics, their base Ocean Waste Marine, Premium Ocean Waste Pacific, and Swirly Atlantic. The Sea Turtle is rated at 5.5, -1.1 in their base blend, and 5.501 in the premium plastics. And to prove that we don't show any favoritism towards our sponsors, the Sea Turtles registered distances of 330 and 327 feet respectively. But the Sea Turtle wasn't designed for distance. The Sea Turtle was designed for accurate shot shaping. It was designed to have a smooth, controllable flight path, to help you navigate tight-wooded fairways and hit gaps with ease. The Ocean Discs Sea Turtle is available at sixsideddiscs.com while supplies last. And when we run out, you can find a list of participating retailers on Ocean Discs' website. Both links are in the video description. Huge thanks to Ocean Discs for once again supporting our channel. Grab a Sea Turtle today in ocean waste plastic and start making waves in the world of disc golf. Now let's see another of our straight mid-ranges, the Prodigy M4. Rated at 5.5, -1.1, the M4, at least in our previous experiences, has been pretty understable, typically turning over easily, but having a little fade at the end. Today though, our M4 never had a chance, but for a different reason. This blend of M4 that we got for our upcoming Mystery Challenge is surprisingly more overstable than many we've tested before. It resists flipping up from hyzer, and despite a couple other efforts, we couldn't improve on this 368-foot shot. Next, let's see a disc that we have pretty high hopes for. It's the Discmania Metal Flake C-Line MD1, or in other words, the Mindbender. One of the last hurrahs before Simon Lizotte's departure from Discmania, the Mindbender was a massive hit with fans and has quickly become a highly sought-after collector disc. Its straight, neutral stability made it a popular woods disc, but what kind of distance can it get? Well, some distance is the answer. From a slight hyzer, it gives us a fairly straight flight with some low-speed fade. And while this may not look like the best pure distance line, we threw each of these discs no less than 3 times, and this was the best flight that we could get from the Mindbender. And it's good enough to put up the new number to beat, 396 feet. But will our next disc be the first to break 400? It's the Trash Panda Dune. This Dune is from a recent run of max weight premium dunes that we got weighing in at 175 grams. It's flexible, domey, and it goes. Flipping up slowly, it finds a super straight drift before some late fade, and it indeed does take us past the 400-foot mark, just barely, to 404. So we know our eventual winner is going to be over 400 feet, but by how much? Well, let's see if a disc designed by a winner can beat the Dune. It's the Prodigy Archive. Here today in 400 plastic, the Archive is the signature mid-range of two-time world champion Isaac Robinson. And this is actually one of 3 mid-ranges we're throwing today that's from my own bag. I personally use the Archive as an overstable mid-range, but how far can it fly? Well, maybe we should have tried one in 500 plastic, because this one tapped out just past 400, equaling the 404 feet of the Dune. With the tie at the top, let's take a moment and see what one overstable and one understable midrange can do against what have so far mostly been straight midranges. Both from Axiom, we have the Prism Proton Pyro and Neutron Paradox. And this is a great opportunity to talk about how we're approaching this whole thing. Obviously, we can't throw these two discs the same way to get maximum distance. If we throw the Pyro on Hyzer, we're just going to see that overstability dump it down to the ground. Similarly, if we throw the Paradox on Anhyzer, we're going to get a roller, so we need to find the right release angle for each disc. Therefore, for the discs you've already seen, and for the rest we'll be seeing, Caleb is adjusting his angle, power, and aim to try and get the best distance straight down this fairway. Let's go ahead and see that Pyro, which at maximum power on maybe a slight Anhyzer, not Caleb's preferred release, it almost immediately starts to fight back, fades out, and only reaches about 375 feet. But hey, let's give it the best chance we can. Caleb decides to go for a 360 full power rip on our other Pyro, and despite the extra rotation and oomph, it goes a whopping 1 foot farther to 376 feet. But maybe the Paradox can do better. From a very steep hyzer on quite a bit of power, Caleb puts it high left and it quickly flips over and slowly turns. But despite this huge flight, it finishes 5 feet shorter than the Pyro at 371 feet. And that explains why, so far at least, our farthest flying discs have all been straight to slightly overstable midranges. But will that trend continue? Let's find out with another understable midrange, the Thought Space Mana. Rated at 5.5, -2.1, and essentially the same mold as the Mint Discs Lobster or the Jester Peace Train, the Mana is typically a reliably understable midrange. And I should know, because this one is mine, though it's not in my bag anymore. For players with reliable power, not me, it should turn without issue. So, will it for Caleb? It sure will. From hyzer, the Mana flips up, turns over, and holds a smooth turn, and keeps on gliding, and finds its way all the way to a new best distance to beat of 408 feet. So from one disc made by MVP for Thought Space to one made for themselves, let's take a look at the Detour. The MVP Detour, rated at 5.5, -2.1 as well, is a straight to understable midrange from the James Conrad line. The one that we're testing today is a Gyropalooza Detour from late last year in Neutron plastic, weighing in at 177 grams. And in our understable midrange comparison just a couple months ago, the Detour flew super far, so we have high hopes. Today, the Detour flipped up to flat, and held, and held, and held, and that must be where it found the distance, because it fades out quite a bit late on. But it makes it all the way out to 415 feet. And just like that, we have a new score to beat. Let's see if the Detour can hold on to that crown a little bit longer than the Mana did. First up to try and take its place are two midranges made by Innova, the Infinite Discs Chariot and the Discmania MD3. The Infinite Discs Chariot is, for all intents and purposes, the new version of the MD3. Now to be clear, Discmania does have a new version of the MD3 that's all their own, but this one is an old MD3 made by Innova, with the old flight numbers of 5502, while the Chariot is rated at 5501. Let's begin with the Chariot, which flips up to flat and holds there for quite a while before some low speed fade. While the MD3 flips over, holds a nice slow drift before finishing straight. So which one do we think went farther? Well, you might be surprised to hear that the MD3 could only manage 360 feet, while the Chariot pushed all the way out to 388 feet. Now, I've seen Eagle McMahon blast an MD3 in the past well over 500 feet, but obviously he's superhuman or something, and not all of us can throw mid-ranges 500 feet. And for Caleb, these two never really showed enough potential to reach the top of our leaderboard. Next up though, let's see two mid-ranges made by Innova for themselves. It's the Mako3 and the Jay. The Mako3 is a straight mid-range rated at 5500, while the Jay is somewhat similar at 5401. In fact, now that I have the time to really look at it, I think the Jay is the old MD3 mold, because boy does it look similar. I guess we'll see how it flies compared to the other MD3s, but first let's see the Mako3. Today we have it in G-Star plastic, and from hyzer it flips up to flat, starts to fade, but eventually shows some late turn, pushing all the way out to 382 feet. Not bad. But the Jay, on the other hand, I don't know. It didn't fly anything like we expected. Nothing really like the MD3 or the Chariot. It got a lot of turn, but no glide. And on every throw, it just kind of dropped out of the air. Its best distance was only 322 feet. Weird. So that's a few discs now that didn't even come close to passing the Detour. So let's take a short break and play a little mini game. This is the Total Eclipse Hexalotl from Halloween 2023. It's one of the most sought after runs of Hex from Axiom, and we threw it 3 times today. Here's the game though. In a moment, I want you to pause the video and take a guess in the comments below of how many total feet of difference do you think there were between each of the throws with the Hex. For example, if we threw it 400, 420, and 380 feet, you'd put 40 feet as your guess. And welcome back. Now, no cheating. Don't enter your comment after we show you, all right? We're on the honor system here today. Here's throw number 1 with the Hex, coming in at 381 feet. Throw number 2 with the Hex comes in at 380 feet. And finally, throw number 3 comes in with 380 feet. The Total Eclipse Hex was unbelievably consistent. A literal 1 foot difference from all 3 throws. How'd you do on the minigame? Reply to your comment below to let us know. And while the Total Eclipse Hex didn't blow us away with distance, it certainly impressed with consistency. But what about a Proton soft Hex? Well, strangely, this Proton Hex didn't have much oomph today. Despite Caleb's best efforts, it was only able to put up a distance of 364 feet. So let's move on from that slight disappointment to our first disc from Discraft, the Buzzz SS. But not just any Buzzz SS. This is a 12-year-old Z Buzzz SS from our local A tier, the Brent Hambrick Memorial Open. This Buzzz SS has been on my shelf for a couple of years, but it's still in great condition, and I think it has a real chance of putting up a solid number. So let's see what Caleb can do with it. On his first throw on a slight hyzer, it turned over and held a smooth turn. And even with a late fade forward, it just didn't have quite enough steam and finished at 383 feet. On his second throw, he managed a little more distance despite the added height, and it held on for 401 feet. But Caleb saved the best for last. On the third throw, he got the perfect hyzer angle and nose angle. It flips to flat, gets a slow drift, and fights back forward late on, and puts up the new number to beat, 418 feet. Now that may only be 3 feet past the Detour, but farther is farther. Now I want you to take a moment and think of a mid-range that could match that, 418 feet. That's a long ways, and you're probably thinking that mid-range would be max weight or close to it, probably premium plastic, aerodynamic, from a well-known established brand that you and all your friends already throw. Yep, you guessed right. It's the XCOM Gemini in Earth base plastic. Oh, you didn't guess that. But yeah, look at this. Not only did the Gemini equal 418 feet on this throw, but on this one, it did 417 feet. And on this one, 408. Giving it the best average distance of any disc we tested all day. Wow. Now, if you want to know more about the Gemini, check out our first impressions video that we did on XCOM a couple weeks ago. In that video, you'll also learn a little more about our next disc, the XCOM Virgo. Here in their Mars premium plastic, the Virgo is a beautiful disc, and as we established in that XCOM first impressions video, its flight numbers are wrong. A few of you commented on the video with a very compelling theory, and I think you're right. It seems that their turn and fade numbers are backwards. So while the Virgo is rated at 4502, it should actually be 45-20, which, based on the discs that have flown the farthest for us so far, I think it has a chance. Or does it? Because this was the best throw that we got with the Virgo, and it didn't really seem to have much more to offer, finishing at 401 feet. Respectable, but not a contender. And that same thing can be said for the next couple discs, including the Kastaplast Gote. Now, to be clear, I don't mind the Gote at all. It has an unusual shape, but I've seen some incredible shots with it in the past. That being said, things don't always go according to plan when we make these videos. I'm sure many of you have seen the bloopers at the end. You get it. Caleb struggled to get a clean release with the Gote all 3 times. And on top of that, it was much more overstable than expected. And therefore, the best distance we got was just 288 feet. Respectable, but not a contender. Next up, the Lone Star Texas Ranger. Rated at 55-11, and in their stiff alpha plastic, it feels pretty nice. It has the same flight numbers as some of the best discs we've seen so far, but this was our best shot with it, reaching just 354 feet. And that's with a big skip too. So, respectable, but not a contender. So what about a couple mid-ranges from Discraft? Surely they stand a chance of delivering. Like this Discraft Metallic Z Comet. Nope, the Comet could only deliver 380 feet. What about the Meteor from Discraft? I've seen some good shots with the Meteor. Nope, the Meteor had an even more disappointing showing. Once again, for whatever reason, it just wasn't holding any glide or distance, coming in much shorter than the Comet at 362 feet. But of course, the Discraft fans are waiting for me to say it. The Buzz. Surely the Buzz can deliver, right? Well, I regret to inform all of you that our Buzz was bitterly disappointing. So much so that I asked Caleb to throw it a 4th and 5th time. And even though all of us have seen Drew Gibson smash a Buzz over 500 feet, just like Eagle McMahon with that MD3 earlier, it just wasn't to be today for the Buzz, finishing out at just 386 feet. But fear not, Discraft fans, because redemption has arrived in the form of the Buzzz SS. Yep, you heard me right. Yes, I know there was a Buzzz SS earlier, and it's still the current co-leader, but what else would you use to beat a Buzzz SS than another Buzzz SS? This Z Buzzz SS is straight out of my own bag, and I love it. And here's why. On its second throw, the Z Buzzz SS delivers for Discraft and mid-ranges everywhere with this gem of a shot, reaching the new distance to beat, 420 feet. So with 6 mid-ranges left, the Buzzz SS is back on top, but can it hold on? Going into this whole test, there were some discs we really expected to do well that didn't. like the Buzzz, MD3, or Hex. And some we had pretty low expectations for that really overperformed, like the Gemini or the Mana. But these next two discs are complete unknowns for us, because these are from Legacy discs. Say hello to the Ghost and the Gauge. Rated at 4503 and 5501 respectively, they are both in Pinnacle Plastic, a tacky, translucent premium blend, and both are close to max weight at 178 grams. And it's been quite a while since we tested some Legacy discs, so let's see what they're all about. Side by side, the Gauge turns over easily, while the Ghost is super beefy. Oh, it's actually the other way around. The Ghost that's rated super overstable turned right over every time we threw it, while the Gauge, rated kind of straight at 5501, had a huge fade every time. I'm a big fan of Legacy plastic. I even bagged a Badger for a while, but the Gauge at 387 and the Ghost at 313 feet maybe didn't quite show us their best today. Perhaps our only mid-range from Dynamic Discs will do a little bit better. It's the EMAC Truth. Rated at 5502, this Lucid Glimmer EMAC Truth was actually featured in a previous video. We know it has some stability, so the idea here was for Caleb to really give it the beans, and maybe it could get some distance. But no, it was just too overstable, barely passing 320 feet. Let's take a look at a couple mid-ranges from Latitude 64, starting with another one I've tried for myself and the straightest mid-range we've ever thrown, the Opto Claymore. Rated at 55, -11, the Claymore was indeed the straightest mid-range in our straight mid-range test last year, and for good reason, because even today it was still super straight. But we're not testing how straight these are, so did straight equal distance? Well, it sure did. 413 feet on our leaderboard. On to our next to last disc, and it's not the one you're thinking of. It is the Pearl. Yep, the easy to throw lines mid-range at just 158 grams and -4 turn. The Pearl is included here simply because I happened to get this one at Idlewild and I was just curious how it would fly. And I thought it would be fun to throw, and it was. Just look at these lines. Caleb's having a blast.
That might be it, dude. I think that might have skipped over the edge. That was nuts.
Oh no!
No, might have died too fast.
I think it did.
Yeah.
It's still in contention though.
But it was this shot here that delivered the new farthest throw, 421 feet. 1 foot farther. But surely we're not going to let 158 gram beginner friendly mid-range win this whole thing, are we? I mean, as if it's up to us, but thankfully there was one disc that decided to take matters into its own hands and fly much farther. Before I tell you what that disc is though, think about all 33 mid-ranges you've already seen. What's missing? What mid-range is gonna top this list? And keep thinking about that while you watch this.
I went left to right with this, I think.
That's gonna go far. That's going real far.
And listen now while I tell you that this 433 foot shot was with a Discmania Origin. This Discmania Origin is the very first edition of the Midnight Prowl, a Kyle Klein Creator Series signature disc. And again, it's one of the ones that's been living in my bag for a little bit. So maybe the fact that it's slightly beat in gave it an advantage here. It's hard to say. But nevertheless, big congratulations to the Discmania Origin. Now, I'm sure you all thought of some mid-ranges that we didn't test today, so leave a comment below and tell us which ones we need to include in a future test. But before we move on, I need to say a big thank you and shout out to Caleb today for his effort on this video and the video that you're going to see next week. We don't normally shoot videos going for distance, and we happen to shoot 2 back-to-back with over 50 discs and 3 to 5 full power tee shots each. Caleb threw over 200 shots in a couple hours. So if you appreciate all the work and effort that he puts in for us here at Six Sided Discs, make sure you go and follow him on Instagram, support him in whatever way you can, subscribe to his YouTube channel, and leave some nice comments for him below. Which mid-range surprised you the most? Leave a comment down below. And also comment below what future tests we need to do here in our Flight Numbers Don't Matter series. For Six Sided Discs, I'm Greg. We'll see you in the next one. From a slight hyzer, the berry flips up to flat, but only for a split second before gliding and fading its way to the current distance. It comes in 3 different... Whoa, that's a bit everywhere. Ew.
You mean 360 this?
No.
All 360.
Don't hurt yourself.
No, I don't want to hurt myself.
All right,
For the bloops, for the bloops.
All right, 360.
Oh! It definitely didn't feel good, though. It did not feel good.
It still didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
With a tie at the top, let's see what one overstable and what but let's move on from that disappointment to our next disc and our first from Discraft. There's a fuzz flying around my head. What is it doing? Which, based on the discs that have flown farthest for us so far, that's pretty good. So much so. If you like this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or supporting us on Patreon. Your support makes this content possible.